Good morning, everyone, and welcome to One Community Christian Church. Today's Father's Day. Yay! To all you fathers out there, you are extremely welcome everywhere. Today's your special day, I should say our special day, and that's a good thing. So, Father's Day Sunday. To all of you, I don't think you give yourselves enough credit. I really don't. I don't think you give yourselves enough credit. That over and over again, you chose to give and love and create space for peace. Not only that, but you extended it outward like an olive branch. A calm in the storm, a quiet place. You were a lighthouse in the darkness. Even when you had every right to be bitter and to sink low and to take your heart off your sleeve and let it grow cold. Even when you had inner work to do of your own, you stayed calm and strong. You did that, and you do that. Yes, you did that. And I just wanted you all to know that I think your strength is really beautiful. I do. All of you. Way to go.
And happy Father's Day again. It's still Father's Day. We're still fathers. Some of us. My Father's Day was spectacular. I had two of the three boys up Friday night. We had Ryan and Bill were up Friday night. And we made hamburgers and we made hot dogs and we made sauce. Well, we didn't. I did. But I loved to grill. So it made me very happy. And all the kids said that the food was good. That made me even happier. And then Nancy crashed the party. But that made it more fun. It really did. And Jonathan, who's in Philadelphia, sent me a wonderful card of me before children and then a picture of me after children. Precious, precious, precious. And he texted me right before service and said, "Happy Father's Day, Dad, I love you." Oh, just doesn't get a whole lot better than that. So for all the men who are here, we have popcorn. We buy the ladies posies, we buy the men popcorn. And so get your bag of popcorn on the way out, and it is yours for Father's Day, and enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Also, housekeeping again, next Sunday, and this is as much for the folks on Facebook and YouTube as it is for everybody here, Mike Manuel will be here to speak for us. Mike is a walking Bible encyclopedia. He's amazing. I've had some dealings with him in the past. I like his heart. I like his attitude. I like everything about him. And so he's going to be here, and Pastor Rick and I are going to take the day off, sort of, and enjoy him. So, all right. I'm embarrassed to say that this message has nothing to do with Father's Day. Brother Rick warmed me up and everything. He said, I really struggled, but here we are. Very simple message, very few scriptures. And we're going to start with Isaiah 55, verse 6. It says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found, and call upon him." When? When he's near. Seek the Lord while he may be found, and call upon him when he is near. Now let's take a look at Acts 13. They seem to have nothing to do with one another, but they will by the end. Acts 13, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, such as Barnabas and Simeon that was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and of course Saul, who later became Paul. And as these folks ministered to the Lord and they fasted, the Holy Ghost said, 'Separate me, Barnabas and Saul, for the work whereunto I have called them.'" This morning we're going to talk about being separated unto God. And what's bursting inside of me more than anything else is He is. They that come to God must believe He is. He is real. He's not a figment of my imagination. He's not a figment of Billy Graham's imagination. He's not a figment of anybody's imagination. He is. He is. And as we said during song service, that I am convinced is the number one hurdle facing all of us who call ourselves believers, is the fact that God is, and that God is God all the time. Being separated unto God. We're going to go over 7 examples of persons in the Bible who were separated unto God. Starting with Noah. Not the one who plays drums, but the one who's in the book of Genesis in the Bible. We read about Noah that the Lord told him to build an ark. Just, 450 feet long or something like that. I can assure you that while that was taking place, that he lived a very separate life from those around him. I can assure you that he was rejected. I can assure you that he was made fun of. I can assure you that many very wise people, very wise and truly wise people, said he's a nut. Just leave him alone. I don't want my kids playing with his kids. He's a nut. They might get lost in that ark, might fall off of it. And his separation doesn't end there. He was really, really separated from his society and his people. When? When it started raining. I can assure you this also. It was unpleasant. It was extremely unpleasant. I don't think that Noah had the kind of heart when the people were, it says that God shut the door of the ark. God shut it. And the people were outside begging as the waters rose. And I don't think Noah was saying, "Serves you right for making fun of me." I think his heart was broken. He heard him screaming and hollering. He heard him dying. He was separated from them. God separated Noah. How about Abraham? God said, "Get out of your country. Get away from your kindred, your father's house. Get out, and I'll show you where you're going to go." And he did, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. We read these things, and they tend to just, God called Abraham, wasn't that nice? That was no minor detail. That's one, today it would be not a minor detail, but back then it was a huge detail because you stayed among your kinfolk. They were tribes. Understand this, they were tribes. And separate from them, you were prey to anybody who would want to come along and have their way with you and kill you, take whatever you have, whatever. But he left. He separated himself from his father's family, his father's house, from his country, because God told him to. And he found himself very alone. Very alone. One night he was alone. The Lord said, I'd like you to, make a sacrifice, cut some animals up, as they did back then. It said a sleep of deep horror came upon Abraham when he was alone, and he saw a smoking furnace going in between the animals that he had cut up the parts of the animals. Prior to that, it said that Abraham shushed away all the vultures and the buzzards. It actually says that. Got the birds off of that. But when Abraham was alone, he learned something. God is. God is. What about his grandson? He had a grandson. He had actually 2 grandsons. He had Jacob and Esau. And Jacob knew what it was like to be alone. Now, mind you, I realize that in the grand scheme of things, this was in God's plan, but Jacob did it to himself. He swiped his brother's blessing. Bless his little heart. He was a swiper. Jacob the swiper. But the last thing his brother said to him was, I'm going to kill you. His mom said, Jacob, you better hightail it. Get out of here. And Jacob found himself alone, separated. And by golly, it happened again. He went to Haran's house and he fell madly in love with Rachel, and he got Leah instead. Because back then, the ladies wore stuff over their faces, and you didn't know who you were going to get married to, and they took the stuff off their face, and he took the stuff over her face. Imagine how Leah felt. We're not going to stay here very long. And he stayed with Laban, I beg your pardon, Laban. And he worked 7 years for Rachel and got Leah. And Laban said, okay, you can have Rachel, but you got to work with me 7 more years. 14 years is a long time. And so he did, and he got Rachel. And then once again, there was a falling out. He had to leave. He had to get out of there and get out of there fast. And Jacob found himself alone. Then came the day of reckoning. He had to deal with Esau. Now mind you, the last thing that Esau said some 20 years prior was, I'm going to kill you. And he wasn't joking. I think he said, Jacob, you're the bug. I'm the windshield. And Jacob was scared to death, and he sent his family away, Leah and Rachel and the kids and all the animals and the herdsmen, and he actually sent them on ahead as gifts to Esau. Maybe it would calm Esau's anger. And he found himself very alone one night. When he was alone, that's Genesis 32:24. Did I write that one down, Mike? Good. I'll read it right here. And Jacob was left alone. And somebody began to wrestle with him. It was God. At the end of the wrestling match, God said, you know what? You're no longer Jacob, which meant supplanter, deceiver. I'm changing your name to Israel, which, by the way, is still in the news today, some 3,500 years later. Changing your name to Israel. When Jacob was separated from everything, you know what he found out? God is. God is. Well, Jacob had a son, Joseph. Jacob favored Joseph. God gave Joseph some dreams that his siblings and even his parents would bow down before him, and that's just not something you share with your older brothers. They had had it with Jacob, and not Jacob, Joseph, I beg your pardon, and Jacob kind of favored Joseph. He gave him a coat of many colors, and they're still making movies and plays about it today, some 3,500 years later. His brothers had had it. They threw him in a pit. And there were a bunch of Ethiopians coming down the way, and they sold him as a slave to the Ethiopians. And Joseph found himself very, very alone, rejected, completely alone, no family, no friends. You know, I bet he had plans too. I bet he did. I bet he did. They weren't plans to be vice pharaoh of Egypt, though. I'll show you great and mighty things that thou knowest not, God says. While he was separated, and while he was alone, and while he was in prison, he made himself a home with Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife accused him of some terrible stuff and had him thrown in prison, stuff he didn't do. Rejected again, first by his brothers, then by Potiphar. I think he was in prison 15 years. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. While he was in prison, he was called out through a series of events. Pharaoh said, "You know what? You've interpreted my dream. Obviously, God is with you. And I would like to put you second in command of Egypt, the greatest nation on the earth." And while Jacob was alone, I keep going back to Jacob, while Joseph was alone in prison, guess what he found out? God is. God is. Well, some 400 years later, a guy named Moses is born. Because Jacob, gee whiz, William. Because Joseph was in charge of Egypt, in charge of the food of Egypt, and a great famine arose, Jacob, for real this time, and all of his brothers came, and Joseph revealed himself to them, and oh my gosh. But it says that a Pharaoh came along that didn't know Joseph, and he enslaved Jacob's family, Israel's family. He enslaved the 12 tribes of Israel. And God told Abraham this was going to happen. This was amazing. He told Abraham, your people are going to be slaves in a land that's not their own for 400 years. But then Moses comes along. At 3 months old, guess what happened to Moses? He was separated from his family because everybody who was all male children who were 2 years and younger were going to be slaughtered. And his family put him in a basket, and he was found by the daughter of Pharaoh, and she took him in. And Moses, his sister Miriam, said, "You know what? I know a Jewish mother who just gave birth, and she can actually feed this little fellow." And so Moses' mother got to feed Moses. But he was separated. And about 40 years later, guess what happened again? He was separated from Pharaoh's house. He saw an Egyptian being terribly cruel to an Israel Israelite. And he killed the Egyptian, and Pharaoh found out about it. And Moses said, much like Jacob, I got to get out of here. And the last thing he knew about Pharaoh is he wanted to kill him. Moses ended up going in with the Midianites, and he ran into a fellow named Jethro. And remember Jethro Bodine? I understand he's still alive. He's like 105 or something like that. Unbelievable. But anyways, he ran into Jethro and kept sheep for Jethro, and Jethro had a daughter named Zipporah. That should have been Moses' first clue. He married Zipporah, and he had sons to Zipporah. And as things progressed, even Zipporah rejected him because he had his son circumcised. She said, "You're a man of blood." So there he was. Moses found himself alone again. But now, I got ahead of myself, and that's all right. It's a good story. But some years before that, he was alone in the desert. Remember that? He was alone in the desert, watching some sheep. He said, "Hark, a bush burneth, and it burneth not up. I shall step aside and see what this great wonder is." And he was alone. And I can assure you, when he was in the desert with those sheep, he thought a lot about Pharaoh's house. Well, I blew that one. If I'd have just gone about it a different way, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. Because don't forget, he grew up in an Egyptian culture. And the lowest of the low in the Egyptian culture did what? They watched sheep. Boy, did I make a bad move. And here I am. But he went aside to see what's going on with his bush. The bush talked to him. He probably thought, uh-oh. Been in the sun too long. He said, "Moses, I want you to go down to Egypt and deliver my people." He said, "I can't do that." He said, "Not only that, Pharaoh wants to kill me. Last time I checked, they want me dead down there." "No, but I want you to go." "Who shall I say has sent me down to Egypt?" And what did God say? "I am." Moses, when he was all by himself, rejected by everyone, found out that God is. "I am what?" He didn't say. "I am." God is what? It's not for us to know, but it is for us to know He is. He is. And that is our greatest hurdle when things aren't going the way we thought they would. Move ahead a few years. We're almost to the end of my examples. This is number 6. There is a young man who was watching sheep again, and his name was David. And Saul, who was the king of Israel at the time, wasn't doing a very good job. He was not obeying the Lord. And the Lord told the prophet Samuel, "I've rejected Saul. You need to anoint me another king. He's of the house of Jesse." Jesse brought all his sons out. Samuel said, "No, it's not this one, not this one." Lord even shared with Samuel a secret. He said, "Do not be impressed with their stature, big, strong, whatever, their capacity to do, for I've rejected them. Man looks on the outward appearance, God looks at the heart. I'm after a man with a good heart." And we need to know that that's not a criticism. All I see is your outward appearance. I do not see your heart. And that's why Jesus said, "Judge not." But David was anointed king. And guess where he did it? Guess who was there? All his brothers. All his older brothers. Kind of like Joseph, you know? I can assure you from that day forward, things changed. He was rejected by his brothers. It was proven. The brothers had gone to war against the Philistines, and the Philistines had this great mighty warrior whose name was Goliath. I think he was 9 foot 6 inches tall. That's a big guy. And David went down to bring his brothers some food in battle. He said, you know what? This guy shouldn't be defying the armies of Israel, or the armies of, of Israel, of God. Isn't there a cause? Shouldn't we do something about this? I'm going to take care of him. His brothers, his older brothers. You know how older brothers can be, right, Nancy? She knows how older brothers can be. You stupid little kid. David put aside all the weapons of war, and he says, you know what? We all know the story. Give me my sling. Give me a few stones. He smoked him. King James says smote, but I said smoke. He smoked him. All his armor that Goliath had on, all 9 foot 6 inches of the guy, there was one little open right here so he could see. By God, that stone hit him right there. It says, and it sunk in. And the Philistines said, uh-oh. And little David, he was 15, 16 years old, said he was ruddy. He had freckles and red hair. He went up there and he took Goliath's sword, which was probably almost too heavy for him to handle, and he cut his head off. Indeed. And all the ladies of Israel said, you demand. They started singing, Saul has slain his thousands and David has slain his 10,000s. Guess who's hating David now? Saul. And he was rejected. And Saul's son Jonathan and David were deepest of friends, and they loved each other deeply. They did put a little test out to see how angry Saul was with David, and Jonathan found out how angry Saul really was. And he kind of repeated the words of others, you better get out of here. My dad's going to kill you. Rejected again. Alone again. He found himself in caves. And if you read the book of Psalms, the Psalms tell us about the God that David found in the caves, alone, running from Saul. Oh, God didn't appear to him like a flaming furnace or a burning bush or anything like that. But God was sure messing with his heart. So much so that David had a chance to kill Saul. Saul was sleeping in a cave, and what he didn't know was that David was further back in the cave. And David's men said, look who's up front, snoozing. David said, don't you touch him. Don't you touch him. He's the Lord's anointed. Yeah, David found out that God, oh, come on, it's not a hard word. God is. He knew so much that God is that he would not touch God's anointed. God is. And he is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. And when are we supposed to seek him? First scripture, seek the Lord while he may be found. One more, number 7, a guy named Saul. Saul's amazing. Saul's story is amazing, I should say. Saul ran headlong into the Almighty. Did you know that when they stoned Stephen, Saul was the one, he was the coat keeper. He kept the people's coats who were stoning Stephen. And they wore big, heavy, like, I don't know, almost like a big dress or robe. I'm going to call it a robe. And you couldn't stone anybody if you were wearing your robe because you couldn't, And my shoulders are so bad I couldn't stone anybody today. They took their robes off. They laid them at the feet of Saul and stoned stoned Stephen. And Saul was persecuting the church. He was a Jew of Jews. He sat at the feet of Gamaliel. He was everything that a Jewish person could possibly be. Until, mind you, he didn't meet Jesus. Jesus met Saul. Till Jesus started messing with him. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He had enough sense to say, who are you, Lord? He knew he was dealing with the Lord. He just didn't know who he was. It said the people around Saul heard thundering, but they couldn't understand the voice. And the voice said, I am Jesus. Whew. Saul found himself rejected by his country. Saul found himself separated from his Jewish brothers, those who admired him. They were his network. They were his support system. They were the ones that picked him up and lifted him up when things weren't good. And guess where they are now? Nowhere. Saul found himself alone. Most of the book of Acts, we read about Paul being separated, rejected by the Jews. When Paul went around and preached, his calling was to the Gentiles, and he would preach to the Gentiles, but he would do it in the synagogues that were in the different Gentile towns. The Gentiles thought he was just awesome. The Jews kept trying to kill him. His own kinfolk. And Paul even said, I would give my own life. I would give my own life if my countrymen would turn to Christ. Saul found out that God is. There's another verse. Did I give you Acts 23, Mike? Yeah. I'll step over here. There arose a great cry. Paul had created a stir among the Jews again, and he turned the Sadducees against the Pharisees. There was a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees part arose, and they strove, saying, We find no evil in this man. But if a spirit or an angel hath spoken unto him, let us not fight against God. Verse 10. We're doing 9 through 11 here. And when... Michael. Okay, for those of you who are watching us on Facebook and on YouTube, I have this character in the back of the church. And he has a way of keeping me on my toes. So if things go haywire, it's his fault. And there arose a great dissension among the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force from among them and to bring him into the castle. Now mind you, we see these castles and we think, how cool. Man, it's really cool, No, not this castle. He was in the holding cell in the castle. Okay, they didn't have anywhere else to put him. Now check this out. And the night after this all happened, the Lord stood by him while he was all alone. And said, Be of good cheer. And Paul said, Right. For as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. Paul was all alone in a holding cell. And guess what he found out? For the second time now. God is. God is. I remember years back, Dad preached many, many times. He had trouble getting away from it. That God wants to reduce us to God. And He will take everything away to get us to the point that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, God is. God is. You know, there's a lot of times in our lives that circumstances come about we weren't counting on. Situations arise, some of them not by our own doing, that just destroy our entire life. Everything just changed. And there's other times that there are circumstances and situations that come about by my own doing. What was I thinking? My whole life just changed. I just messed everything up. My support system is gone. My family, the group of friends that used to be my network, they're gone. People I thought I could count on are gone. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him when he's near. We've got to look at things different. Got to look at things different. Yep, I'm alone. I didn't ask for this. Maybe I did. It's irrelevant. Galatians 1:15. We're going to wrap things up here. A few scriptures. This is Paul's response. It's quite interesting. Galatians 1 verses 15 and 16. Paul is telling the people in Galatia in his letter, but when it pleased God, the same God who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me, or to reveal his Son to me that day, that I might preach him among the heathen or Gentiles immediately. What's his response? I conferred not with flesh and blood. The next 3 years of his life he spent in Damascus, in the wilderness. You know how he spent it? Alone. Then he spent 15 days in Jerusalem. He went back out into the wilderness for another 14 years. And you know how he spent it? Alone. Jesus so messed with his head. I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. O gee. He lost everything. Joseph lost everything. Abraham walked away from everything. Everything. Moses, by making a bad decision, lost everything. He went from growing up in the White House, if you will, to keeping sheep on the backside of the desert for some guy named Jethro, who named his daughter Zipporah. Lord in heaven. God said, I am. By the way, I am. Just a couple more. No, just one more, actually. Philippians 3, 7 through 11. This is Paul talking again about his being separated from everything that he knew and everything that was his support system, his network, everything's gone. Paul says in Philippians 3, 7, but what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. Yea, doubtless I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Christ, and be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith, that I might know him and the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his sufferings, being made conformable unto his death, if by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead. They that come to God must first believe that he is. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is going to reduce each one of us to God. Everything we've known. I mean, the world all by itself is just sitting there changing right in front of our eyes. This is not the same society that I knew growing up as a kid. But it's way deeper than that. It's way deeper than that. I had a lot of people that I counted on. You know what they did? Most of them? Not what you think. They died. They just died. They're not there. You know, I had a home church back in Detroit, and they were my network, my support group. Even when I was here, I had a group of friends, and we spoke often. But there came a circumstance in my life that they disapproved of. They're not there anymore. And it's a really good thing. Because God said, don't even consider the things of the past. Don't even consider. Don't even pull it apart and what if and what if and woulda, coulda, shoulda. Don't. Because I'm doing a new thing. So if you find yourself alone, it's going to sound funny. If you find yourself alone, you're not alone. Alone, the support systems are gone. The pleasures of life aren't what they were. It's God. And he's going to bring us all to the point that, I lost it all. And it was so worth it to gain Christ. Jesus said a lot of things. He that believeth in me, the things that I do, he'll do greater. And what's the qualification? Just to believe in him. Now, wait a minute. I believe in him. Not yet, I don't. Not like I'm gonna. Was it Bachman turning an overdrive that sang "Baby"? You ain't seen nothing yet. Baby. Call upon him. He's near. It's a pain. It's a pain to be separated from everything and everybody. It's a pain to be alone. But when Abraham was alone, he saw a burning furnace. When Jacob was alone, a man wrestled with him and changed his name and changed his nature and changed his character. And we still talk about his new name today. Can you imagine that? Because when Jacob was alone, he was not alone. So don't, if the change is whatever. That's kind of my prayer anymore. Say, Lord, I don't even know what to pray. I don't even know how to pray, and Paul says that in Romans 8:26. We don't even know how to pray. I don't even know how to pray. So, whatever. Nevertheless, not my will, thine. God's bringing all of us, each one of us, closer to him. And it's a painful process. And it's so worth it. It is so worth it. Let's stand and commit ourselves back to him again this morning. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yes. To our friends on Facebook and YouTube, we're going to say goodbye. Glad you were here with us today. Come on out and see us sometime. We'd love to have you. Usually we're friendly. It's the lovingest bunch you'll ever meet. Goodbye. Let's seek the Father on Father's Day. That was Glender.